The soft clinking of fine crystal glasses filled the dining room of Le Bernardin in Manhattan. Candlelight flickered across our white tablecloth, illuminating the quiet elegance of our 5th anniversary. I smiled across the table, leaning forward toward my fiancée. "Happy anniversary, Vanessa," I said gently, reaching into my jacket pocket. 5 years today." Vanessa Hayes didn't smile back. She sat perfectly still in her tailored beige dress, staring down at her untouched glass of vintage wine. "Caleb," she said, her voice dropping into a flat, formal tone, "take this." She reached down, unclasped the diamond ring from her left ring finger, and slid it slowly across the white tablecloth until it rested right beside my water glass. I stared at the sparkling band, my chest tightening instantly. "Vanessa, what is this? Is something wrong with the ring?" "The ring is fine, Caleb," Vanessa replied coldly, looking directly into my eyes without a single trace of warmth. "Our relationship is what's wrong. I'm returning it. We're done." A cold shock swept through my veins. Done? We're celebrating 5 years together. We were supposed to pick out a wedding venue next month. "I can't do this anymore," Vanessa said, raising her voice slightly as nearby diners turned their heads to look at us. "I am so tired of waiting for you to grow up, Caleb. Look around this room. Look at the people dining here. Real men with real careers. Men who build empires. I work 80 hours a week as a lead analyst," I said, keeping my voice low so as not to create a scene. "I pay our rent. I buy our groceries. I took you to this restaurant tonight to celebrate us. You live like a frugal pauper, Caleb." Vanessa spat out, her eyes narrowing with intense disgust. "You drive a 7-year-old sedan. You wear off-the-rack suits. You drag me to cheap diners on weekends while my friends get taken to St. Tropez on private yachts. I save our money for our future," I pleaded softly, leaning closer. "Vanessa, wealth isn't about showing off every dollar. I live simply because I want us to build something permanent. I don't want your simple life," she snapped loudly, slamming her purse onto the table. "I am 27 years old, Caleb. I am done living an average, cheap life with a man who has zero ambition." A smooth, familiar laugh echoed from behind my chair. "Well said, darling," a man's voice purred. I turned my head to see Harrison Vance stepping up to our table. He wore a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, his blonde hair slicked back perfectly, smelling of expensive cologne. He casually slid his arm around Vanessa's waist, pulling her flush against his side. Vanessa didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into his chest with a soft, satisfied smile. "Harrison," I frowned, standing up from my chair. "What are you doing here?" "Taking what's mine, Reed," Harrison smirked arrogantly, resting his hand on Vanessa's hip. "Did you really think a high-class woman like Vanessa was going to spend the rest of her life in a cramped Brooklyn apartment with a low-level paper pusher? You've been seeing him?" I asked, looking at Vanessa, feeling a deep, agonizing knife twist inside my chest. "Harrison is the heir to Vance Global Investments, Caleb," Vanessa said, proudly smoothing down the front of her dress. "He lives in a penthouse on the Upper East Side. He takes me to real galas. He offers me a lifestyle you couldn't afford in 10 lifetimes. You threw away 5 years of trust for a trust fund playboy?" I whispered, staring into the eyes of the woman I had planned to spend forever with. "It wasn't a hard choice, mate," Harrison chimed in with a loud, condescending laugh that drew the attention of the entire dining room. "You were just a temporary stepping stone until someone with actual status showed up." Harrison reached into his breast pocket, pulling out a thick money clip loaded with $100 bills. He peeled off 5 bills and tossed them directly onto my dinner plate, right on top of my steak. "Here's $500, Reed," Harrison sneered, leaning in close to mock me. "Consider dinner paid for. Go buy yourself a nice suit so you don't look like a waiter next time you come to a real establishment." Vanessa giggled, linking her arm tightly through Harrison's. "Come on, Harrison. Let's go to the Sky Lounge. The air is so much cleaner up there." "Enjoy the bus ride back to Brooklyn, Caleb," Harrison added, giving me a dismissive pat on the shoulder before turning to walk out toward the valet area with my fiancée. Several waiters and high-society diners stared at me in pity, whispering behind their linen napkins as I stood alone at the table. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a punch. I didn't even pick up the money sitting on my plate. Instead, I picked up the diamond engagement ring from the tablecloth, slid it back into my pocket, and buttoned my suit jacket. I looked at the grand chandelier hanging above the dining room floor, feeling a cold, dangerous calm settle over my heart. Harrison Vance thought he was a king because his family ran a regional investment firm. Vanessa thought she had just stepped onto the top of Wall Street's food chain. They had no idea. They didn't know that Vance Global Investments was currently bleeding capital. They didn't know who held 70% of their debt. And they certainly didn't know that the humble analyst sitting in front of them was the sole owner of Apex Capital, the multi-billion-dollar hedge fund holding their entire financial survival in its hands. I turned around and walked out into the cool Manhattan night in total silence. The subway ride back to Brooklyn passed in a blurred haze. I unlocked the heavy oak door of my apartment, stepping inside to the familiar smell of chamomile and roasted almonds. "Caleb, sweetheart?" A gentle voice called out from the kitchen. My mother, Martha Reed, walked into the hallway, wiping her hands on a floral apron. She took one look at my pale face and empty fingers, instantly realizing the truth. "Oh, Caleb," Mom whispered, pulling me into a warm embrace. "She did it, didn't she?" "5 years, Mom," I said softly, resting my chin against her shoulder. 5 years thrown away on a dinner plate. "Come sit down," Mom said, guiding me toward the wooden dining table and pouring a steaming cup of tea. "Drink this. Tell me what happened." She handed the ring back before the main course even arrived. I said, staring into the dark amber tea. She said I lacked ambition. She called our life together cheap. "You build a honest life, Caleb," Mom said, her eyes flashing with maternal anger. "Your father and I taught you that true value isn't measured by flashing diamond watches or throwing money around." "It gets worse," I added, letting out a heavy sigh. Harrison Vance showed up at our table. Mom frowned, setting her teacup down with a sharp clink. "The Vance Global heir?" He put his arm around her right in front of the entire dining room. I said, my voice hardening. "Harrison paid for our dinner by throwing $500 bills onto my plate." Vanessa laughed and left with him. "That ungrateful girl," Mom said, shaking her head in utter disbelief. "She mistook your humility for weakness. She forgot who stayed up with her when she had nothing." A loud, frantic knock echoed at the front door. "I'll get it," I said, rising from the chair. I pulled open the door to find my best friend, Ethan Ross, standing in the doorway holding a thick leather folder. His tie was loosened, and his forehead glistened with sweat despite the cool night air. "Ethan," I asked, stepping back, "what are you doing here at 10 o'clock? I've been looking for you everywhere, Caleb." Ethan panted, stepping inside and nodding respectfully to my mother. "Good evening, Mrs. Reed." "Caleb, I heard about what happened at Le Bernardin." "News travels fast on Wall Street," I said dryly, closing the door behind him. "Harrison Vance has been bragging at every rooftop lounge in Manhattan for the past 3 hours," Ethan revealed angrily, dropping his folder onto the dining table. "He's telling everyone he stole your fiancée, and that Vance Global is about to dominate the market." "Let him brag," I said calmly, pulling out a chair for Ethan. "Harrison thrives on optical noise." "It's not just noise, Caleb," Ethan said, unzipping the folder to pull out a stack of financial balance sheets. "Harrison is telling investors that Vance Global just secured a massive multi-million-dollar capital injection to double their trading leverage." "Where are they getting that kind of capital?" Mom asked, sitting back down beside me. "Their firm has been struggling for months." "That's exactly why I ran to your apartment tonight," Ethan said, pointing a finger at the top ledger. "Look at these corporate exposure reports." Harrison convinced his father to take massive short positions on technology stocks, but their underlying capital is totally hollow. "Hollow," I echoed, leaning closer to inspect the numbers. "What are they borrowing against?" "They are leveraging a revolving credit line," Ethan explained, turning the page to reveal a stamped institutional seal. "A $500 million emergency liquidity facility granted 3 years ago." I stared at the black emblem on the top right corner of the document. "Apex Capital." "Exactly," Ethan said, leaning back with a sharp smile. "Vance Global doesn't own those assets. Apex Capital underwrites 70% of their active portfolio. If Apex freezes that credit facility, Vance Global goes under in 48 hours. Mom looked between the two of us, her brows furrowing in confusion. Wait, Caleb, isn't Apex Capital the entity your grandfather established? Yes, Mom, I answered softly, feeling the heavy burden of my true identity shifting in my chest. When grandfather passed away 2 years ago, he left 95% of Apex Capital's controlling voting shares to me. Caleb chose to keep it completely private, Ethan added, turning to my mother. He wanted to live as a normal analyst so he could find someone who loved him for who he was, not his bank account. And Vanessa threw that love away for a man who was living on borrowed money, Mom said softly, tears of realization brimming in her eyes. She traded gold for painted brass. Harrison thinks he won, Caleb, Ethan said, sliding a black digital security key across the table toward me. He thinks he took your woman, ruined your pride, and cemented his position as a Wall Street playboy. He has no idea that the man he threw $500 at holds his family's entire legacy in his hands. I picked up the black security key, feeling the cold metal edges against my palm. For 2 years, I had hidden behind plain suits, quiet desks, and frugal spending to protect Vanessa from the dangerous greed of high society. I had let her believe I was just an average man struggling to make ends meet. What are you going to do, son? Mom asked gently, placing her warm hand over mine. Are you going to let them destroy your peace? No, Mom, I said, looking up at her with complete, absolute clarity. I'm done hiding in the shadows. What's the play, Caleb? Ethan asked, his eyes gleaming with intense excitement. Do we execute a margin call? Not yet, I replied smoothly, closing the folder with a firm snap. Harrison wants to play executive in front of Wall Street. Let him build his throne a little higher. Tomorrow morning, I step into the corner office at Apex Capital. And Vance Global? Ethan pressed. When they come begging for their credit extension next week, I said, standing up from the table, I'll be the one sitting at the head of the boardroom. The private elevator shot up 40 floors in complete silence, bringing me to the top of the Apex Capital Tower on Wall Street. I adjusted the cuffs of my bespoke charcoal suit, stepping out onto the plush dark gray carpet of the executive wing. Good morning, Mr. Reed, a poised, sharp woman in a sleek cream blazer called out, stepping forward to greet me with a confident smile. Good morning, Evelyn, I said, offering a firm handshake. It feels surreal walking in here without my old analyst badge. Evelyn Sterling, our chief investment officer, chuckled softly as she guided me toward the glass-walled corner office. You spent 2 years pretending to be an entry-level employee, Caleb. I would say it's about time you sat behind your grandfather's desk. I walked into the massive office, taking in the panoramic view of the Manhattan Harbor. I sat down in the plush leather chair, resting my hands flat against the polished mahogany surface. I assume Ethan briefed you on last night's events? I asked, looking up at her. He did, Evelyn replied, her warm smile vanishing, replaced by a cold, razor-sharp edge. And frankly, I am disgusted. To humiliate you publicly at Le Bernardine over a trust fund playboy like Harrison Vance? Vanessa Hayes has no idea how foolish she truly is. Let's leave personal matters out of the ledger, I said smoothly. Show me Vance Global's current exposure. Evelyn opened a thick leather binder, placing several high-frequency trading reports across my desk. It's worse than we anticipated, Caleb. Harrison convinced his father, Richard Vance, to approve massive short positions on blue-chip technology stocks over the last 48 hours. Using our liquidity? I asked, leaning closer to review the numbers. Precisely, Evelyn pointed her silver pen at a highlighted row of figures. They are heavily over-leveraged. They used $300 million from our revolving credit facility to secure high-risk margin positions. If the market shifts even 2% against them, their entire firm faces immediate capital depletion. Harrison is gambling on borrowed money to impress a lifestyle he can't afford, I said, shaking my head. He promised Vanessa a high-society paradise built on a foundation of sand. The market doesn't care about vanity, Caleb, Evelyn stated plainly. And to make matters worse, we just received an urgent electronic filing from Vance Global's executive team 20 minutes ago. What kind of filing? I asked, Raising an eyebrow. Richard Vance submitted an emergency formal request to double their revolving credit line from $500 million to a full $1 billion. Evelyn revealed, sliding a stamped document toward me. They claim it's to secure strategic market dominance, but our internal risk sensors tell a different story. They're burning through cash. I realized, reading through the frantic requests signed by Richard Vance himself. Harrison is throwing lavish parties, booking private jets, and buying luxury properties to keep Vanessa happy, and his father is covering the balance using our institutional credit. They treat Apex Capital like their personal ATM, Evelyn said, leaning against the edge of the desk with her arms crossed. If I sign this extension, we absorb their risk. If we deny it, they freeze. Where is Ethan right now? I asked. He's downstairs in the risk assessment unit, double-checking their secondary asset valuations, Evelyn answered. He agrees with me, Caleb. Vance Global is operating on pure borrowed time. A quiet knock sounded on the glass door, and my best friend Ethan Ross stepped inside, holding a glowing tablet. Caleb, you need to see this, Ethan said, tapping the screen before handing it to me. Harrison Vance just posted a live video from a yacht in the harbor. I looked down at the glowing screen. Harrison stood on the deck of a luxury vessel, popping a bottle of expensive champagne while Vanessa stood beside him, laughing loudly in a designer white dress. We are expanding the Vance empire, Harrison announced to the camera with an arrogant grin. Special thanks to our institutional partners who make unlimited growth possible. Real power doesn't sleep. He thinks that credit extension is already approved, Ethan said with a dry, bitter laugh. He's throwing a victory party before the ink is even on the paper. I set the tablet face down on my desk, feeling a quiet, unwavering resolve settle over my heart. Evelyn, I said, picking up a heavy gold fountain pen from the stand. Yes, Chairman, she asked, standing up straight. Draw up a formal notice of decline, I instructed, my voice steady as steel. Apex Capital explicitly rejects Vance Global's request for additional credit expansion. Evelyn's eyes lit up with absolute satisfaction. Consider it done. What about their existing $500 million line? Order an immediate, full-scale forensic audit of all assets tied to their current collateral, I commanded, tapping the document with my pen. I want every trade, every offshore account, and every margin liability accounted for by Friday afternoon. If we initiate a full audit, Richard Vance will panic, Ethan warned, a grin spreading across his face. He knows their books won't survive a deep inspection. Let him panic, I said coldly. Richard covered for his son's reckless arrogance, and Harrison used my generosity to tear my life apart. Now they will answer to the true owner of their debt. I will send the formal rejection notice directly to Richard Vance's personal terminal, Evelyn said, taking the folder back into her hands. He will receive it within 10 minutes. Thank you, Evelyn, I said, standing up to look out over the sunlit Manhattan skyline. How does it feel sitting in the chairman's chair, Caleb? Ethan asked softly, stepping up beside me. It feels clear, Ethan, I answered, watching the white sails of Harrison's yacht drifting far below in the harbor. Harrison and Vanessa wanted to play games in the world of high finance. It's time they learned who rules the board. 7 days after Vanessa threw my engagement ring onto a dinner plate, Wall Street took a massive downer. Technology stocks plummeted 4% in a single morning session, sending shockwaves through every trading floor in Manhattan. Look at the board, Caleb, Ethan said, pointing a finger at the wall-mounted monitor in my corner office. Vance Global's margin positions are burning through cash like dry wood in a forest fire. How much liquidity do they have left? I asked, leaning back in my leather armchair as I watched red numbers scroll across the screen. Virtually nothing, Evelyn answered, stepping into the room with a freshly printed compliance binder. Their primary accounts dropped below our mandatory maintenance threshold 15 minutes ago. They are officially in technical default. They tried to bluff the market, I noted softly, keeping my tone completely calm. Harrison assumed tech stock values would skyrocket forever. Well, his bluff just blew up in his face. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. And instead of cutting their losses, guess what Harrison Vance just organized down in the press room? A public press conference, I guessed, raising an eyebrow. Bingo, Ethan said, pulling up a live video stream on his tablet screen. He invited every major financial network in the city to Vance Global's corporate headquarters. It's starting right now. I leaned forward, watching the live broadcast. Harrison stood behind a sleek podium wearing a high-end designer suit, hair perfectly combed back. Vanessa sat in the front row of the audience wearing a bright silk coat, smiling proudly up at him. "Good morning, members of the press," Harrison declared into the microphones, projecting an easy, confident smile. Despite recent temporary market volatility, Vance Global Investments remains completely rock solid. In fact, I am thrilled to announce today that we are finalizing a multi-billion-dollar strategic partnership and capital merger with our premier financial backer, Apex Capital. Evelyn let out a sharp, incredulous laugh right beside my desk. A merger? Did he seriously just manufacture a fake corporate union on live international television? "He's utterly desperate, Evelyn," I said, watching Harrison field questions from loud reporters on the screen. "He knows if he can lie to the public long enough to stabilize their stock price, he might avoid an immediate bank run." "That is outright market manipulation," Ethan said, his eyes flashing with righteous anger. "He is using our firm's name to bail out his failing ego." "Draw up the formal paperwork, Evelyn," I instructed, turning away from the glowing screen. "It is time to issue an official margin call against Vance Global Investments." "With pleasure, Chairman," Evelyn replied, pulling out her golden tablet. "Under Section 4 of our original credit agreement, they will have exactly 48 hours to post $500 million in cash collateral, or we liquidate every asset tied to their firm. Make sure the notice is delivered directly to Richard Vance's personal office," I added coldly. "No more games." As Evelyn turned to walk out of the office, my personal cell phone buzzed loudly against the polished surface of my mahogany desk. I picked it up. A text message notification from Vanessa Hayes popped up across the glass screen. "Caleb, I saw your old friend Ethan lurking near the press conference earlier." The message read, "Stop sending your friends to spy on us. Harrison is a powerful billionaire who just secured a merger with Apex Capital. I know you're bitter, but stay away from my new high society life and stop embarrassing yourself." I stared down at her text message, feeling a quiet, heavy wave of pity wash over me. She truly had no idea. I slowly typed back my response, keeping every word precise. "I am not spying on you, Vanessa. Harrison's announcement was an illegal lie. The firm funding your luxury penthouse and lavish parties is in default. The mansion you just moved into belongs to a company that is officially 48 hours away from absolute bankruptcy." 3 seconds passed before my phone buzzed again with her instant reply. "You are completely insane and delusional. You're just jealous because Harrison offers me real luxury while you sit in a cheap apartment." Blocked. I set the phone down quietly, shaking my head with a faint, somber smile. "She didn't believe you, did she?" Ethan asked softly, observing my calm reaction from across the table. "She chose blind greed over truth, Ethan," I said, leaning back to stare out at the massive glass skyscrapers filling the afternoon sky. "She bought into Harrison's illusion without ever asking who owned the foundation." "The formal margin call notice has been officially signed and dispatched, Caleb," Evelyn declared, walking back into the office with a crisp, stamped envelope in her hands. "Our legal couriers are on their way to Vance Global right now." "What happens when the 48 hours run out?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with intense anticipation. "Richard Vance and Harrison will have no choice but to come to this building," I answered, my voice quiet as steel. "They will beg for a bailout, expecting an anonymous board to save them. And when they walk through those executive doors," Evelyn asked, a sharp, knowing smile gracing her lips, "they will discover that the man holding the power to end their empire," I said, looking directly at my grandfather's framed portrait on the wall, "is the same analyst Harrison tried to pay off with $500. The heavy double doors of the top-floor executive boardroom at Apex Capital swung open precisely at 10 o'clock. I sat at the head of the long mahogany conference table, keeping my high-backed leather chair turned facing the floor-to-ceiling glass window overlooking Wall Street. "Ah, good morning, board members," Harrison's loud, pompous voice echoed across the quiet room. We appreciate you scheduling this emergency meeting on such short notice. Let's make this quick so we can wrap up our credit extension. Quiet, Harrison, a stern, older voice barked. Richard Vance stepped into the room, his face pale and lined with visible panic. Show some respect. We are standing in Apex Capital's primary boardroom. Relax, Dad. Harrison scoffed loudly, stepping further inside with Vanessa clinging tightly to his arm. They sent us a routine margin call notice to satisfy standard compliance. Once they see our asset portfolio, they'll approve the bailout package immediately. Apex needs us as much as we need them. Are you sure about that, Mr. Vance? Evelyn Sterling's voice cut through the air like a razor blade. Of course I'm sure, Miss Sterling. Harrison chuckled arrogantly, straightening his designer necktie. Where is your chairman anyway? We were told the principal owner would be presiding over this bailout meeting personally. Tell him to step out so we can sign the documents. The chairman is already present, Evelyn replied smoothly, taking 2 steps to the side. Ethan Ross stepped forward from the corner of the room, smiling broadly. Allow me to introduce the sole owner, chairman, and principal shareholder of Apex Capital. I slowly rotated my leather chair around to face the front of the room. The silence that fell over the boardroom was absolute. Vanessa's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated horror. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Her leather handbag slipped from her frozen fingers, crashing loudly onto the carpeted floor. See, Caleb? Vanessa gasped, her voice cracking as her face turned completely pale as paper. What are you doing in that chair? Caleb Reed. Harrison stumbled backward, his arrogant smirk instantly evaporating into total disbelief. What kind of sick joke is this? Why is my ex-fiancée's low-life ex-boyfriend sitting in the chairman's seat? Watch your mouth, Harrison. Richard Vance snapped, glaring at his son before turning back to me in utter terror. Wait, Reed, you're Arthur Reed's grandson? The sole heir to the Reed estate. I am, Mr. Vance, I said, resting my hands flat against the mahogany table. Welcome to Apex Capital. This is impossible, Vanessa cried out, looking wildly between me and the executive team. He's an analyst. He drives a 7-year-old car. He lives in a small Brooklyn apartment. Harrison, tell me this is a prank. Shut up, Vanessa, Richard shouted, his face turning beet red with fury. He turned toward Harrison and slapped him hard across the cheek. The loud crack echoed through the boardroom. Harrison stumbled back, clutching his red face in complete shock. Dad, Harrison yelled, his voice trembling. Why did you hit me? You absolute idiot, Richard roared, pointing a shaking finger at his son. You told me you were competing with a nobody. You told me you humiliated an average clerk at Le Bernardin. You insulted the one man on Wall Street who holds $500 million of our debt. Dad, I didn't know. Harrison pleaded desperately, his cool composure completely shattered. How was I supposed to know he owned Apex Capital? Because you are an arrogant, foolish boy who judges men by their clothes instead of their balance sheets. Richard spat out bitterly. He turned back to face me, taking a deep, desperate breath as he clasped his hands together in supplication. Mr. Reed, Chairman Reed, please. My son acted out of ignorance. Vance Global has worked with your grandfather for decades. We are begging for a 90-day extension on the credit line. An extension? Ethan interjected coldly, stepping up beside my chair. After Harrison publicly lied on national television yesterday, claiming Apex was merging with your sinking ship, I can issue a retraction. Harrison blurted out frantically, taking a step toward the table. Caleb, Mr. Reed, please. We can fix the press release. Just approve the bailout. I'll give Vanessa back to you. Take her. Just don't destroy my family's firm. Vanessa gasped, looking at Harrison in utter betrayal. Harrison, what are you saying? Shut your mouth, Vanessa. Harrison yelled at her, his voice frantic and hysterical. You're the one who dragged me into this stupid rivalry. You wanted a billionaire, and you threw away the actual owner of Wall Street. I looked at the two of them standing before me, screaming, blaming each other, and crumbling under the weight of their own greed. There was no hatred left in my heart, only a cold, quiet realization of how hollow they truly were. "Evelyn," I said softly, ignoring Harrison's pathetic pleas. "Yes, Chairman?" Evelyn asked, stepping forward with a leather-bound legal document and a gold fountain pen. "Is the foreclosure notice fully prepared?" I asked. "Yes, sir," Evelyn answered, placing the paper directly in front of me. "Under Clause 12 of your credit agreement, Vance Global's failure to post cash collateral entitles Apex Capital to immediate asset seizure. Every account, building, and luxury asset tied to their corporate leverage will be liquidated." "No. Please, Caleb, don't do this," Vanessa sobbed, throwing herself forward against the edge of the table, tears streaming down her face. "I made a mistake. I was confused. I still love you, Caleb. Please, let's go back to how things were." "You didn't love me, Vanessa," I said quietly, unscrewing the cap of my fountain pen. "You loved the idea of wealth, and you traded loyalty for illusion." I pressed the tip of the pen to the paper and signed my name firmly across the bottom line. "Caleb Reed, Chairman." "It's over, Richard," I said, sliding the signed foreclosure document back to Evelyn. "Apex Capital is seizing Vance Global's assets effective immediately. Ethan, escort them out of my building." I stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass in my executive office, looking out over the clear blue expanse of the New York harbor. The sun reflected off the water, bright and steady, matching the quiet certainty settling in my chest. Months had passed since Vance Global collapsed into bankruptcy, taking Harrison's empire and reputation down with it. My phone buzzed on the mahogany desk behind me. I turned and picked it up, seeing Ethan's name on the screen. "Are you coming down, Leo?" Ethan asked the moment I answered. "The press conference starts in 20 minutes, and your mother is already holding court in the main lobby." I chuckled, adjusting the cuffs of my suit jacket. "Tell her I'm on my way. Is Evelyn with you?" "She just arrived," Ethan said, his voice brimming with excitement. "Everything is set. The paperwork for the new fund is finalized, the board members are seated, and the reporters are eager. Today changes everything, man." "It really does," I replied, taking a final deep breath before heading toward the private elevator. "I'll see you in 2 minutes." The elevator ride down was smooth and silent. When the doors slid open on the ground floor, the bright lights of the lobby filtered into the hallway. But as I stepped into the vestibule near the main glass entrance, a familiar figure blocked my path near the exterior doors. Vanessa stood there, trembling slightly despite the warm morning air. Her face was pale, devoid of the sharp confidence she used to wear like armor. When her eyes met mine, a fresh tear spilled down her cheek. "Leo," she whispered, her voice cracking as she took a step closer, clutching her designer purse to her chest. "Please, just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I stopped a few paces away, keeping my hands resting casually in my pockets. "There's nothing left to discuss, Vanessa." "That's not true." She reached toward me, her hand hovering in the air before dropping helplessly. "Harrison lied to me about everything. He ruined me, Leo. I lost my career, my savings, my standing, everything. I was blind, and I made a terrible mistake." "You made a choice," I said quietly, keeping my tone perfectly even. "Multiple times." "I know," she sobbed, stepping into my path as if trying to hold me in place with her gaze. "I was foolish and greedy. But every night since the trial, I think about how good you were to me. How you supported me when no one else did. Can't we just try to talk? Can't you forgive me?" "Forgiveness isn't about giving you back a seat at my table," I said. "I've moved on. Leo, please." She reached for my wrist, her eyes desperate and pleading. "I still love you. I know you still care about me somewhere inside. You can't just throw away everything we had. You threw it away the moment you chose status over loyalty," I replied softly. Without waiting for another word, I stepped around her. Her tearful pleas echoed behind me as the heavy glass doors swung shut, but I didn't look back. The pain that used to consume me was gone, replaced only by clarity. Inside the grand lobby, Martha was speaking warmly with several investors, her smile radiant. Evelyn stood beside her, looking elegant in a navy suit, holding a leather folder containing our foundation documents. Ethan spotted me first and raised his glass of sparkling water in a toast. "You made it," Ethan said, walking over to meet me. "Did you run into any trouble outside?" "None at all," I said, offering him a steady smile. "Just the past fading away." My mother walked over, her eyes shining with pride as she placed a gentle hand on my arm. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you today, Leo. He always believed this family's legacy was meant to build people up, not crush them." "We're making sure of that, Mom," I said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. "His name belongs on something that actually matters." Evelyn joined our circle, handing me the signed charter for our new venture. "The Legacy Fund is officially live, Leo. Every dollar allocated will support ethical tech startups and sustainable communities. We already have 30 major backers signed on for the first quarter." "That's incredible news, Evelyn," I said, scanning the document. "Your team did remarkable work getting this organized so quickly." "We believe in your vision," Evelyn said, her eyes fixed on mine with genuine warmth. "When a leader operates with integrity, people want to stand behind him." "To the Vance Sterling Initiative," Ethan said loudly enough for the surrounding guests to hear, raising his glass higher. "And to reclaiming what was always meant to be yours." "To new beginnings," Martha added, beaming at me. "To the future," I said, feeling the weight of the past years lift entirely from my shoulders. We walked together toward the auditorium where the journalists were waiting. The room buzzed with cameras flashing and murmurs of anticipation. As I stepped up to the podium, I looked out at the crowd, then back at my mother, Ethan, and Evelyn standing proudly in the front row. I leaned toward the microphone, ready to speak not out of anger or a desire for revenge, but out of a deep, unshakable confidence in who I had become. The heartbreak, the betrayal, and the struggle had tested me, but they had not defined me. I was finally stepping into my true worth, and my grandfather's legacy was finally in safe hands.